Hi everybody, welcome to episode 60 of the Run to the Hills podcast, sponsored by Cheer Charge. This week, Eddie and I talked to Brodie Sharpe, an Australian-based physio and podcaster. It was a great chatting with Brodie. Such a perfect combination of knowledge and enthusiasm, and I really think it came across in our conversation. But before we get into Brodie, a little catch up with Eddie over in France. How are you doing, Eddie?
Good. I was just telling you, you've got a load of really fun stuff you've been doing. And I was thinking on my horrendous session this morning, what can I haven't done anything. It's a run, don't have a shower, just get changed into normal clothes, go and get the kids, give them food, take them to their activity, come home, do more running, get changed again. Try to remember to shower, because it did get to like a couple of days yesterday when I thought, I think I've done 4 runs and I think I do need to have a shower, because it's getting a bit colder. This is my excuse. I think you don't sweat as much because the air is quite dry, and so it's cold. So you kind of come in, I'm freezing, I'm really busy. So I quickly just put jumper on, and then I'm like, oh, dinner, this is going. Anyway, we digress, because yes, all is good, apart from I have been doing one of my favorite housewifely jobs is the transition from summer to winter activities. So all the summer stuff goes away, all the kids' summer clothes go away, all the swimming stuff gets packed away. We have all sorts of paddle boards and stuff, and out come the winter stuff. The skis, the poles, everybody has to try on their salopettes. They can't fit them on.
You have to chain up the tyres on your car as well.
Yeah, tie the gloves onto the coat for Bryn for when he goes to the office. And so I opened up the ski cupboard. So we have this really cool cupboard, which is hot inside. So we can turn it on. So when you come back from skiing, you can put everything in that's wet. And then when you open it, so I hung everything up there at the end of the winter last winter. And I thought to myself as I did it, normally we put it all into plastic boxes and in the loft. Couldn't be bothered. So I was like, I'll leave it in there, but I'll check on it a couple of times. Because I didn't do any of that. Opened it up, and I'm going to call it the mouse had been in there. And I don't know how. This is such a mystery. So it's a closed cupboard, but it somehow has got into it and put the little dog biscuits we give the dogs, into each of all the snow boots. Yeah. Every single snow boot, even my cross-country ski boots, had like 3 or 4 little dog biscuits in, and little bits of them all chewed out, and all its little fluff everywhere, and then it had just died. Oh. Pee, poo everywhere, and half the snow boots all eaten. That was minging. So I've just been spending my whole day. It literally took me a day to sort all of that out. I had to throw my boots away. I was like, I can't. There's been a dead mouse in there, but the kids' ones, I just kind of like rinse them out a bit. And then when I said to my littlest girl, can you go and see if your snow boots fit? And she put a boot, and she was like, oh, there's something in here. I was like, oh, it's nothing. Anyway, these are the trials and tribulations of living in the mountains. They're so bad that the police put out a warning on the Morzine Facebook group saying, if you are a chalet owner or a hotel owner and haven't been in your house or apartment, you need to go in, because the mice are rife in Morzine. Apparently, so my neighbour, who always has all these great old wives' tales, said to me that if there are lots of mice at this time of year, it means it's going to be an epic snowy winter.
Oh. I love an old wives' tale.
All I know is that I've had enough of mice and them ruining my kit, and dead mice.
Mice orgy.
Anyway, but apart from the mice, I've been doing some good running, some enjoying I think today's the last of our beautiful autumnal alpine weather, and then the rain's coming in, which we have to have, because we have to have a bit of moisture for the snow to come. I had my biggest session, I reckon, for a long time this morning, 10 by 1K progressive.
Oh my goodness.
And I actually did my full warm-up, which normally, I don't know about you, but I slightly skimp on the warm-up normally, kind of 10 minutes. And I kind of if I know I've got a session, my heart rate's just going up anyway, because I've got that nervous anticipation.
Yeah.
But I did a full 20-minute full warm-up, increasing the pace, a few strides. Basically, I realized that it was because I really just didn't want to do the session. So I was just prolonging the
Yeah, we've been there.
agony of it to come. But it was good. It was progressive. It wasn't quite as fast as I kept looking at my watch going, oh, when you're like, this is really fast. And then you look at, oh, I just get looking at the heart rate. I worked really hard. It was done. It's good. Out on my own, bit tired, been single parenting a lot. And to face the session of 10 by 1Ks when you start. But I was like, well, you've got to face 75K, 77K when I've got to get to the turnaround point of my next race and go back again. Because you've got to get some mental toughness in these sessions, haven't you?
And what was the effort? Would that be like, say, threshold? Yeah,
so I started off with like kind of just like a steady effort. And I sort of set my benchmark by the first one of like a steady, kind of like I could do this for a couple of hours pace, maybe an hour. And then I just try each one to get 3 or 4 seconds faster. And then the last kind of three or four, I just go for it. But knowing I've still got 3 more to do, and it's only 60 seconds recovery in between.
Oh, yeah.
So it's quite good. But I like sessions like that because I think it's really important to do a session mentally as well as the physical side of the training.
Did you breach the 170 beats per minute?
Oh, I haven't looked at my max. It was definitely up there. The last 3, there was a good steady 168. I love it. And the dogs like look at me, especially when when you just finish that rep and you're like literally, especially when you're at altitude. I'll blame the altitude for my fitness. Altitude, you're like, and I'm standing there just going, they're like, what? Why have you stopped? Are we turning around and going back again? And also, why are you making that noise?
Yeah, what's that noise?
What's that noise?
I hear that when you've got like, say, a 60-minute recovery, and when you've kind of caught your breath, you look down at the watch and there's like 15 seconds to go.
47 seconds is gone. And I'm like, oh my God, no. Yeah. Oh no, it's the quickest minute ever. And then running a minute. Yeah. So yesterday, the day before, I had to do 30 seconds max hill sprints. And that's the longest 30 seconds known to man when you start sprinting. And I try not to look at the watch because when you're going like max out, even looking at the watch means you're not going max out. So I kind of try to do the first one, mark where I got to 30, and then just try and do the same each time. But I have to admit, by the last couple, I do have a sneaky like.
Stop early. Anyway, sometimes though, when you're going that fast, the GPS I think is quite inaccurate. You just can't.
When you're going that fast, you're so kind, Gary.
It's on the script.
I did write that to coach. I was like, I'm not going to worry about the pace because the heart rate was there. The pace will be what it will be. Yeah. I also really enjoyed watching the Golden Trail series. They YouTubed it on was it Saturday. I didn't catch it all, but I caught the last bit of the women's and the men's race, of which looked, the suffering, and they are so tough. So stuff. The guy Stian, who's a Norwegian, who is in the lead, he's been training up in Avoriaz just above me. So I've seen him a few times and been like, oh my God. I've seen him in Carrefour. I've seen him in the pharmacy. Excellent. I've never actually seen him running. I just seen him out in Morzine and been like, oh my God. Anyway, he was leading till the last descent where he was going so fast and it was on volcanic rock. He fell over and then I think he must have hit his head. And he was wobbling all over the trail. And then he got down like a road and he was wobbling. It was like, it's like, somebody stop him, please. Anyway, but it was great. If you haven't seen, I think you can go on their YouTube channel and they've got like a recap. If you want to be inspired by watching people, amazing runners, running up things that we would struggle to hike up and then running down things that I'd probably need a rope to get down. Incredible, really inspirational.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Talking about inspirational, Gary, how are you? And tell us what you've been up to.
Well, the admin first, we did a Lakeland 100 recce, which was really good actually, from Ambleside to Kentmere and then back to Ambleside, and then from Ambleside to not quite Chapel Style actually. We called it a day a bit short, but still I think we did 26 miles, and it was great. We might chat about it later, but I was just curious because the pace on that run was, I think, 11.5 minute miling overall. That's a hell of a lot faster than I will be doing the Lakeland 100, even starting off that I won't be starting off that pace. And I just thought it was an interesting observation that if I'm training for a marathon or anything else, the event speed is usually faster than, say, the long slow run. But with this 100-miler, it's almost like flipped. I could never, my goodness me, if I did 11.5-minute mile on the Lakeland 100, I don't know if that's a podium finish. That'd be pretty good.
I'm expecting nothing less, Gary.
Oh no, don't say that. Too much pressure. And that was wicked. And then, but then we did the classic 20. I enjoyed that. And then I did a 10 minutes and then 5 times 1K and another 10-minute sandwich. And that was good. But I only did 2 strength sessions. And what I think I'm going to do, it seems such a shame actually, because I've worked so hard with the YouTube channel, my little YouTube channel, and it takes up so much time. I think I'm going to put it on pause for a little bit because,
Gary,
well, I will put.
People will be. What will your followers do?
Devastated. I will put stuff on there, but with YouTube, it ends up being like this big. You're on this hamster wheel. You've got to put a video out every week or 2 videos a week. So I will still be doing it, but maybe as and when I can record stuff and just not be so stressed out if I miss it, because I'm not doing the exercises that I want to do, and if I'm not careful, I'll get myself injured and then I won't be doing any exercise and I'll be really upset.
I think you have to have a priority list, don't you? And depending on where you are in your life, that priority list shifts and where you are in your training cycle. And you've got a big marathon coming up. So you just need to shift stuff around to make sure those things, and as you said, you pausing things, it's fine. Life.
Oh, it's fine.
Important. Your 3 subscribers will understand.
I've over 1,100, Eddie, as we speak. I'm an influencer. Imagine that. But yeah, the big thing that happened was the Bob Graham round dinner. And you know what? One late night for Gary, and I'm only just recovering now from it.
Tell me all about it. I should just say that when we connected to make this podcast, the first thing I noticed was that framed right behind Gary is his
There we go. You've got to go to YouTube, listeners, for this, but it's kind of a Bob Graham round certificate.
Bob Graham map.
Basically, came back from Tesco with a little frame for it.
Is he in Innovate gear there? Salomon gear?
Yeah, Salomon, Speed Cross there, and he's got a hydration vest and everything. Mike, you know, we have sleepless nights about kit that we wear, and this guy here there with his
he looks like he's going to get the harvesting.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, wonderful night, and it was great. You know, we saw some guests. So Charlie Parkinson, that was great. Had a chat with Charlie. It was nice, and he got a special mention from Selwyn, the host, Selwyn Wright. And we saw Emma Roper too, a friend of the show. So awesome to see. And there was other people I saw on various bits of social media, that other people that listened to the show were there too. So it was quite funny that they're all there, but were
they too shy to come and say hello?
Shy to say hello. Yeah, that's what
it was. A special table with like cordoned off and you're like around.
The VIP. Well, we did it. We're on the next table actually, to Beth Pascal and oh my goodness me, his name is blank. We did the super fast Bob Graham recently. Billy Wild, yes. So they were just touching distance. But
did you touch Beth? Did she ask you?
Did I touch Beth? I got gotta control yourself.
Did you talk to Beth?
I do, not in a professional capacity. I presented with my certificate. Mark Hartel. So yeah, another legend. And got a lovely photograph. But no, I didn't talk to anybody. I'm not really confident like that, so I didn't. Yes,
what makes you wonderful, Gary. I'm sure that Beth was thinking, I'm pretty sure that's Gary from my favourite podcast.
Yeah, I was curious if she did recognise me, but you know, she never said anything. But great speeches. And Selwyn, who was the chairman, I think he was like hosting the evening, and he was such a great host. But he's handed over to Paul Wilson, who is the secretary. So yeah, he's got. Selwyn did such a great job hosting, and hundreds of people there. And I was just thinking, my goodness me, this would be like my nightmare to do this. But Paul, yeah, I think it's in safe hands. But what they did do, which was they forgot to do my certificate. So Neil got his and I didn't get mine. But it did come about 5 minutes later with fresh ink on it. So they were, it's quite funny. But yeah, Nikki Spinks was there too. She did a great speech. And Finlay talked about his Bob Graham. So yeah, for all of us nerds in the room, that was really interesting.
Gary.
And it was just awesome. When you'll know this at a start line or an event, when you are surrounded by your people, it's just a really lovely place to be. And I had a thoroughly good night. I didn't really drink. I was on the shandies to try and not write off the Sunday, which was good, really, because I was just exhausted. Went to bed at 2:00 in the morning and 3 men in a room, lots of wind and snoring and stuff like that. And I think most of the wind was coming from me, to be honest. I'm not going to set anyone else up.
What didn't you have lentil curry to eat?
I did have the lentil curry, yeah, which was very good. Yeah, I was pretty windy, I can't lie. But yeah, it was good.
Was it everything you imagined it to be? Was it worth all the effort?
It was, and I think it was for everybody, even the people on the committee, because this has been crikey 2019 since it came, and then obviously Selwyn standing down, so it was a big night for lots and lots of people. And yeah, just a great night had by all. And I can't, but I didn't dance. They had is it a Keelty? How do I pronounce it? Kaylee, yeah. And I'm not shy of dancing. I mean, I've done that with Sedgefield. And I like the Kaylee because they tell you what to do, basically. But it just never happened. I just didn't dance.
I love a bit of the Kaylee too.
Yeah, I thought, you would have loved it. And that was that. We had a little, we drove back on Sunday, and that was up. Yeah, exhausted. I can't do 2:00 in the morning.
No.
That is me gone.
Can't do past 10, Gary.
No. And I think that is my week. It's just quite sad because I don't think I'll ever go to Bob Graham Round reunion dinner now.
That really is it. You really can't talk about it anymore now unless you're going to go for the record.
Well, we've got Dougie, haven't we? Got Dougie.
I'm just going to let you do that. I'm going to come on the Zoom call, but I'm going to be mute and just let you just dribble for an hour.
Yeah, we've got a double Bob with Dougie. So yeah.
Double Dougie.
Every nook and cranny. It was awesome. But yeah, really, really good night. And thank you to everybody involved for putting on the Bob Graham Round reunion dinner. Yeah, fabulous. Results. You go first. Go on then, Eddie.
So I was alongside watching the Golden Trail series on YouTube, taking 2 kids to football, 1 to tennis lesson. I was also tracking the Autumn 100 run by Centurion down in the south of England. What an exciting race it turned out to be, especially in the men's field with the second fastest trail 100 mile time on Great British soil, recording by Jacob Snogoski, I think he is pronounced, in 13 hours, 59:21 seconds. And the second place lovely guy, Pete Windross, in 13 hours, 59:31. 10 seconds difference after 100 miles racing.
Crazy.
What makes this even more exciting is that they didn't start together. Pete started, he was the last starter in the race.
Yeah.
So all the way through, they weren't actually racing side by side. So it looks like they're racing side by side, but they weren't. Pete was always 20 minutes behind Jacob. And in the last leg was close, and got to within 3 seconds of him. Jacob was going at like a 9-minute 15 or something minute mile, and then obviously got some intel from the last checkpoint going, you're being caught by this guy that you can't see. He's actually 20 minutes behind. And so he dropped down to a 7:48 average for the last few miles, finished, and then had to stand and wait to see if he'd actually won. And Pete obviously turned himself inside out. They must have both turned themselves inside out to record super fast times, and to be only 10 seconds difference. But I think that might be the end of the rolling starts now, because that would have been, I bet they'd have maybe even run faster, or maybe one of them had been blown up if they'd had actually been going side by side. But amazing to see fast racing back. Yeah. And in the women's field, we had Holly Rush in 16 hours, 21 minutes. And she talked about on another podcast, going for the women's record, which is about an hour or so faster than that. But she'd done a pretty speedy London Marathon a few weeks before. And she does talk about, if you head over to Instagram, about, she was a bit more tired than she thought she was going into that. And she talks very honestly about, it was a mental and physical battle, the whole race. And I love it when people do, you were saying as well, we love it. She put it out there that she was going to try and do it. That's super brave, would never do that. But kudos to doing that. But then also for just grinding it out and finishing when the day didn't go as planned, still an amazing time, but also then being really honest about how hard it was. Because I just think so much of our sport is all you see is these amazing pictures of people running over ridges, and don't see the bits in the middle at the end, the next day. So what an exciting race to have that fast 100-mile trail race in England, and kudos to Centurion for always putting on such amazing races.
Yeah, well done, everyone. And, like you say, Holly put it out there on that other podcast, and they've got lots of listeners. So, put a lot of pressure on herself. Didn't have the day she was hoping for, but still, fantastic. And then we popped over to Wales.
What even is this? This is just...
I don't know the ins and outs of it. The Lawn Lass, there's a few of them, but this one is the one in Wales, 253 miles in total. But Vicky Izzy Owens was the first female finisher, and I'm pretty sure she has been the only female finisher of that event at all. And by the sound of it, when I was looking on Facebook, they had to do a bit of a sprint finish to get under the cutoff times. So... You're talking about Jacob and his intel. Can you imagine that? And I think they had to, I can't remember exactly what it was, but when I looked at the time they had to do, it was like, that's after doing 246 miles, then to do
Someone says, by the way, we're packing up.
You've got to do 9-minute mile and after all of that, or something, whatever it was. But and then we got James Ballsy Bassett. I don't think that's his real name, to be honest. But he took the overall win in the event. And it looked absolutely bonkers. Guy from the Northeast, Andrew Nesbitt, he did it. And what I think is fantastic is I hear quite often that, people prefer certain trail, certain road, fast running, long running, short 5Ks. Andrew Nesbitt, I saw him at the cross countries of the week, and then now he's rocking up in Wales to run 250 odd miles, literally.
I'd love to see that training plan.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then we had Alicia in action again, haven't we?
Talking about grit, determination, longevity, consistency. Alicia McColgan, who's been sponsored by CheerCharge this season, I mean, she's just incredible. She must have had one of the best seasons out of all the Olympiads. She has just carried on. She must be exhausted. Carried on racing until she found her form. And then once she found her form, she's just been unstoppable. And I think a lot of that must be down to confidence.
CheerCharge.
Of course, confidence and CheerCharge. She won the Great South Run 10-miler in a course record of 50 minutes 43 seconds, and a European record too. Have you ever run a 10-miler? I've only ever run one.
Yeah, there's a Thirsk 10-miler, which Olivia, our previous guest, it's organised by the Thirsk Athletic Club she's involved with, and it's fantastic. Jack Rowe took the win for the overall win, in 47 minutes and 20 seconds, and he was second at the Vitality Big Half and third at the Manchester 10K. So another busy athlete who is flying. So well done. Well done, everybody racing actually over the weekend. I know we don't get to mention all of the races, but some brilliant performances.
This week we catch up with Australian-based physio Brodie Sharpe. He does a very good podcast called the Run Smarter podcast, and he also has a really informative, that's the word I was looking for, Instagram page called the Run Smarter series, which has got loads of, I love I love Instagram for like all the pretty pictures and stuff, but also he has like, I guess you'd call them infographics, is that a word? But a picture with like just some really good ideas and really good tips on all sorts of different injuries. What I really enjoyed talking about Brodie is, and I always think this is a really good sign of a good physio, is he likes to keep people moving as much as possible. He understands the importance of movement in recovery and movement in our lives. And I can imagine he's no BS, is he? He's like, well, first of all, educate yourself and then find out about your injury yourself. I really liked that as well. So here we are, our chat with Brodie Sharpe.
Hi, Brodie. Welcome to the podcast. How are you? Where are you? And have you been for a run today?
Thanks for having me on, guys. Yes, I am doing very well. And today, actually, so I've decided to do my strength work instead of a run. So ran 3 days in a row before that, and so needed a break.
And sensing from the accent, you're not from North England, as most of our...
No, I'm not even from South England. I'm a bit further south than that in Melbourne, Australia.
Wow.
It's nice to reach out, Eddie. We're kind of like I know you are an international co-host, but it's nice to reach out to the other side of the world.
Man, we've gone international at last. Before we start, we've got a plethora of questions to ask you, Brodie, but could you share with us a little bit about your journey as a runner, as a physio, and as a podcaster as well?
I'd love to, yeah. So I graduated from physio in 2012. I wasn't a runner at that stage. I was actually a basketballer playing somewhat high competitive basketball, and did that for until about my mid-20s. And after that, went traveling, came back and was wondering what I should do. And my sister half marathon at that stage and wanted me to train with her. She wanted a bit of accountability because she's that type of personality that needs that. And so, I agreed and quickly caught the running bug and was quickly injured. And I was at the time working at a physio clinic, just a generic kind of private practice physio clinic where I was seeing a whole bunch of injuries. And I just recognized once I became a runner and I started having injuries and frustrations and wanting to get back to pain-free running, all those sort of things, that I just had a heightened passion when I would treat runners. And the small population that would come into my generic physio clinic, I would just be buzzing as soon as I saw a runner. I'd want to get them back to pain-free running as best I can. And so it brought out my better self. I really strived to learn a lot, try and get these clinical outcomes as best as I could, educate the runners as best as I could about injury prevention. And so I made the conscious decision over, several years to transition away to my own clinic. So I have an online physio clinic at the moment where I just treat runners. And so alongside that, as I opened up, it was called the Run Smarter Physio Clinic. I also started the Run Smarter podcast and had the goal to try and educate runners as best I can, like interview health professionals, interview researchers, and try and illuminate and highlight a lot of these running misconceptions and sort of bring light to a lot of these misconceptions that are out there, because we might discuss a fair bit of it today, but there's some wild misconceptions out there that just aren't backed up by evidence and are just myths, really. And it can
that have been folklore from PE lessons in the 1950s.
Absolutely. And it can provide a lot of confusion for people. And so the Run Smarter clear up a whole bunch of things. And if they are struggling to overcome an injury, help as a bit of a resource to kind of get them back on the right track.
Well, we talk about some of the misconceptions and common mistakes. We'd love to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Where do we start? I think when it comes to like injury prevention itself, I think it's good for us to start the conversation with why runners get injured to start with, why people think it's like shoes, people think they don't stretch enough, people think it's like their preparations. But when it comes down to it, the vast majority of running injuries that are out there are due to an abrupt change in training that exceeds the capacity of a certain tissue. So you have joints, you have muscles, you have tendons, you have ligaments that all have a certain threshold, that all hold a certain capacity, where if you exceed that capacity, it's going to start breaking down rather than building up.
Yeah.
And so we're all familiar with training errors. We're all familiar with like abrupt changes, that being like running too much mileage, running too fast, too soon, anything that's exceeding that capacity that way. But what might catch someone out or slip under the radar is things like terrain. Like they may be running on the flats and then all of a sudden they're doing hills. I know there's a lot of trail runners listening to this, so perhaps there might be something to do with the terrain, maybe too much of an abrupt shift.
Yeah.
Maybe their shoes, maybe they're used to running in supportive shoes, and then all of a sudden they've changed the features of a certain shoe, and that's been too much of an abrupt shift. Maybe they've been under recovering a lot. I know, especially if we're talking around the ultra community, they'll get to a stage where your traditional recovery methods can no longer match your external load output. And we want to make sure that that sort of balances each other out. So it's all about making sure we're not under performing in a capacity that's exceeding our limits. And if it does exceed our limits, breaking down, developing tendinopathies, developing muscle strains, developing like these joint kind of issues like patellofemoral pain or runner's knee, those sort of issues. And so once we understand that concept, like all of these other misconceptions that we start talking about will start to make sense. And a lot of the other like confusions out there around why you get injured, it will start to make a lot of sense.
Is there anything to back up certain types of shoes? You get lots of shoes that have support and some are neutral. I think I've been prescribed as I should be wearing like a structured shoe, but I do just run in neutral shoes, and I'm pretty injury free for the most part. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very common experience for runners to have, where they want a running shoe. They're not sure what running shoe they should get, and they go into a store and they say, what's going to be the best for me? What shoe would I thrive in? And they have a look at your feet. They have a look at your foot posture. Maybe they get you to walk on one of those pressure pads where it kind of measures where you distribute weight, and they kind of classify you as a pronator or flat feet or neutral or a supinator with quite a high arch. And then they select a bunch of shoes that correlate with that category. They say, you have a flat foot, you pronate or you overpronate, you need these type of shoes. And when it comes to the evidence and injury prevention, there's no correlation between the foot shape that you have and the type of shoe that you need. There was a nice study that looked at several hundred runners, got a whole bunch of different foot shapes. So they got them with over supination, supination, neutral, pronation, overpronation, all of those types of feet. And then they all put them in a neutral shoe and they all put them out in the world, got them to log their mileage and just saw how they went. And they actually measured kind of time until their first injury was like the measurement, their survival. And they all got injured at the same rate. And just very slightly, the pronators actually got injured less, and starts to think that maybe pronation has a little bit of a injury prevention mechanism to it, because we know that pronation is very healthy. We all get injured if you can't pronate. Like everyone needs some level of pronation because it helps absorb the load that when you collide with the ground over a longer period of time. If you just slam into the ground without anything giving way, you're going to generate enormous amount of like ground reaction force. But we haven't come to a study. We haven't found a well-designed study that says if you have flat feet, you need stability shoes, or vice versa, those sort of things. And so the advice that we do have for runners is, first of all, you need to run in the shoes that you have adapted to. So the ones that you're most familiar with are the different types of shoe properties put on your body. So a minimalist style of shoe, maybe a zero drop style of shoe, will put a lot more force through your foot, will put a lot more force through your heel, will put a lot more force through your Achilles, your calf, pretty much everything below your knee.
Yeah.
And if you go from, say, a stability shoe and you transition way too quickly to something of a minimalist quality, the risk of you developing a calf injury or Achilles tendinopathy or a foot stress fracture, they slightly creep up. You have an increased risk of developing that. But if you transition really gradually and you transition slowly enough that the body has enough time to adapt and catch up, then it significantly reduces that risk. And then if you've adapted to two shoes, the minimalist and the supportive, then you're at a reduced risk of developing those sort of injuries. And so when you're talking about you have a neutral shoe and you seem to be not really developing any injuries, that's fantastic. It means you've adapted to those shoes. You've got used to those shoes. The tissues and the structures within the body are used to working with that type of shoe. And so the advice that I do have is someone does go to a running shoe store, in most cases, is just try a whole bunch of different things out. See which one kind of feels more natural for you. Ben O'Nig, who's I think he's a podiatrist, but he's a very well-rounded researcher around shoes and foot mechanics, just has this comfort filter, this comfort kind of theory. Try a whole bunch of different shoes out with different qualities, and whatever feels really good for you would have as the best comfort. Whatever feels the best is most likely going to be the one that's suited to your mechanics and your strengths a little bit more, and you're going to thrive in it a little bit more, maybe reduce your risk of injury. But that's usually the advice that we fall on when it comes to someone who wants to try a different shoe.
You know, we know now as runners, don't you? When if you try and the minute you put your foot in a shoe and you're like, oh no, that's not right. Or you put one in and you're like, you literally do a few steps and you're like, I know I'm going to like this or I'm not going to like this. But yeah. So can we go back a little bit? So before, this is probably bad for business, but presumably you don't really want to see runners in your clinic. You prefer them to be out running and healthy. So can we talk a little bit about the prehab, the sort of buzzword that lots of people like talking about, of how runners can prevent meeting you and coming to see you? What can we sort of do as runners to, as you've said, to thrive rather than to get injury? Are there any sort of top tips you can give to listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. And if my advice and my podcast and my content, if that prevents an injury, then I've done my job. That's like my sole focus as a physio, which is great. And I've had a lot of people listen to my episodes and come back to me and say, you're not doing yourself justice at all. It's actually bad for business. Because I've had people that have struggled to overcome, say, shin splints, and they listen to a couple of episodes and then it goes away. And they say, I was so close to calling you. And then it's totally gone away. You're not doing yourself justice. And
I kind of feel the same. I'm a running coach, and I kind of feel one of my sort of main philosophies is to educate my athletes, and to almost, it's a bit like a sort of nurturing role, to almost teach and educate, give them everything I can, so that when they get to the race or a big adventure, they're their own person. They're totally in charge of their own performance, and they don't need me anymore. So you kind of probably feel that same sort of relationship.
Building up your running IQ. When it comes down to it, when we say, okay, having too much of an abrupt shift in training leads to injuries, you can also rephrase that as having a training error. So a training error is what's leading to a lot of these injuries. And so if you educate yourself to avoid training errors, then that significantly reduces your risk of injury. And so education is 100% the best thing that you do. And runners who come to me with my management plans, a lot of it is education. It's how you got the injury in the first place, what stirs it up currently, what you modify within your running so you can still stay running while injured, and then just educate way is a tremendous empowering kind of component for them as well, because they start to learn not only about their injury and about their pain, but these lessons that they can carry for the rest of their running career. They just have ingrained a lot of these lessons. And I constantly have listeners saying, Brodie, every time I go for a run, your voice is in my head saying you probably shouldn't do this, or like, this is a good thing to do. And like just constantly, I've had that effect on people where it's like my voice is ingrained. I think I'm dodging your question, Eddie, a little bit around what runners can do. So I think when it comes to implementing something or some practical kind of tips that runners have in order to reduce their risk of injury, I think just writing things down or following a plan in order to make sure you avoid those abrupt shifts in training is just the number one thing that you can do. Adaptation education is an episode on my podcast for a reason. It's because once you learn about adapting as a runner and how to best influence that, how to best enhance those adaptation qualities, how to adapt to a whole bunch of different conditions, to running fast, to running hills, to running down hills, maybe running in minimalist shoes. If you can adapt to all these things, you become more resilient. And so that would be my number one tip. If you have a whole bunch of ultra runners who are constantly breaking down, maybe it's time you not just look at training errors, but you look at recovery strategies and optimizing recovery. I think that equation needs to really balance itself out. If someone is constantly getting injured, is training for an ultra and has a lack of sleep, tons of research out there to show how powerful good quality sleep has to your recovery. And that's definitely something we need to look at. Like I talk to ultra runners who are very successful and they sleep 9-10 hours per night. And they also work in a couple of naps throughout the week somewhere, just because they understand the benefits that it has, as opposed, like, you prefer to stay in bed and sleep and have a sleep in rather than get up half an hour earlier just to do a few stretches or foam roll and those sort of things before a run, because they think that that's kind of like a recovery or that's a warm-up kind of method. If you were to get all the recovery strategies, if you were to get like hot cold therapies, hydrotherapies, massage balls, foam rollers, everything, every single piece of recovery that you have in your toolkit, and stack them all up upon one another, it still won't surpass the benefits of a good night's sleep or extending your sleep. And so it's really important that people recognize that, especially those ultra runners, because their output is incredible. It's quite high. Their weekly mileage is enormous. And so their recovery kind of needs to match that output. And so understanding adaptation, understanding optimizing your recovery will like just enhance your running resiliency so much.
And I say to a lot of people, that new mums, people with families, people with stressful jobs, that if you don't get that sleep, you need to adapt your training. You can't do it the other way. So if you're not getting the sleep, then back off on the training, and actually you will then keep the consistency and you will still gain fitness. But if you're not getting the sleep, it will have its knock-on effect and you will get injured, because the sleep is absolutely the gold standard, isn't it, of recovery? Yeah. But it's very hard for people with families, with jobs, to get enough sleep and then to also commit to a full training program.
For sure. And I think the smart decision, because I'm all about training smarter, that's why I've got the Run Smarter podcast, but how smart would it be if someone was to recognize, okay, maybe I have a newborn baby, or I've just changed my job, or I've just moved house, it's extremely stressful, not getting a lot of sleep, I need to back off my training now, I need to preemptively reduce my mileage because I recognize that my recovery strategies are not ideal. So let me back off the intensity, let me back off that mileage, and then ramp back up. That is a decision to make. And even though they might recognize that their performance might suffer, or they recognize that their recovery isn't ideal, they still want to train so much. This is why runners get injured so much, because they're very self-driven, they're very motivated, they just want to run themselves into the ground, they want to perform. And so that's why these overuse injuries are so prevalent in the running community. Like an example for myself, I've just moved house, and not only did we have the stresses of moving house in the middle of like Melbourne lockdown and all the stresses that came along with it, but we haven't had blinds or curtains installed in our house for the last 2 weeks. And it gets light at our house at around about 5 o'clock in the morning. And so we're waking up very early. We're trying to go to bed early, but recognizing myself, my quality of sleep has been significantly affected. I'm definitely not pushing myself. I'm taking things nice and easy, nice and slow. And then once that improves, once the stress sort of improves, once the sleep quality improves, that's when I'll start ramping. And because I recognize the benefits or recognize the outcome that it might have. And if I was to develop an injury down the track and kept my training as is, I would have said that was a stupid decision. You knew that making that decision would increase your risk of injury. And so you'd beat yourself up if I were to ever develop an injury in that circumstance. And so made the sensible decision just to back off for a couple of weeks.
I think it's really important to be able to manage your whole kind of outlook on training and life. And then I always say to Eddie quite often, I've got a cup and I can only put so much into that cup. And if it starts overflowing, then something's got to give. But are there any, I was curious for our listeners, if there's any common early warning signs to look out for if you're kind of just about to be injured, or you're juggling too much and you're spinning too many plates?
I think early signs will be different for everyone. Sometimes people just like lose the zip in their run, they lose motivation, or they're just lacking a little bit of energy in some cases, particularly if it's the recovery strategies. Sometimes they're a bit down. Sometimes the body can say that. But sometimes it can just be a very mild form of an injury developing. If someone's really done something wrong and they're used to running a 20-kilometer week and all of a sudden they've done a 50-kilometer week, that injury will surface quite quickly, quite abruptly. And then you'll wake up, you'll have this injury straight from the get-go. But in most cases, if you just slowly start to tick or exceed that adaptation zone really gradually, really mildly, then it can just be stiffness. I think plantar fasciitis is a really classic case of something that really sneaks up on you. It can sneak up on you very gradually. All of a sudden, you've had this stiff heel in the first steps of your morning for 5 minutes, and then it just goes away and you forget about it. And then all of a sudden, you've had this stiff heel for the first 5 minutes for 2 weeks now, and that 5 minutes is turning into 10 minutes. And that 10 minutes is that 2 out of 10 pain is turning into a 5 out of 10 pain. And all of a sudden, for whatever apparent reason, you've had this for 2 months and you have no idea why you've had it for 2 months. And that can be an example of something that really gradually creeps up on you. Sometimes it can be more drastic, but there's examples of the two. And so just having a bit more awareness around your body sensations, around tightness, soreness, stiffness, and especially when you first wake up in the morning is a good tell sign if the body's adapted or responded well to the previous 24 hours. If you wake up and you're stiff and sore and that's getting worse and worse, then that might be some early signs as well.
Every day, post 40, every day.
Goodness me, I know it's all down my left-hand side. I'm sure the whole thing's connected. I get from my back to my glutes to my hamstring, and I can see my quads spasming occasionally. And I know when I just feel a little dull ache in my left-hand lower back, and I think, yes, I need to pay a bit more attention to the strength and conditioning and mobility work.
When it comes to morning symptoms like this stiffness, soreness, like some people will just get a general stiffness, but what we want to make sure is it gets no worse. Like your training doesn't contribute to worsened symptoms. And so if you say, yeah, I feel stiff when I wake up in the morning and it lasts for like half an hour after a warm shower, it's fine. But I've stayed at that stiffness, that severity of stiffness for the last, 12 months. Yeah. That's totally fine. It means that you're kind of, if you build up your training and those morning symptoms are no worse, then we can kind of assume that you're still negotiating those loads perfectly fine. But if you go for a trail run and all of a sudden that morning stiffness is a lot worse, it's a lot more widespread, it lasts a lot longer throughout the day, then we can start to interpret, okay, maybe we're not going down the right path, and maybe we need to change something in your training.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about your opinion on strength training and running?
Absolutely. I can talk about this all day.
You look so excited. You're like,
go.
This is it.
Yeah. Because we can address some misconceptions at the same time. Yeah. So misconception number one is endurance athletes think they don't need to strength train because they need to train for endurance. They feel like that's something that they constantly need to tap into. They focus on like specificity. So all I need to do is train that is specific to my event. If I'm a trail runner, I should just be trail running or building up my mileage as a runner so that I can perform as a runner. Makes sense. But what we fail to comprehend is you have a certain limit. Like we say, these training errors lead to overuse injuries, which is repetitive injuries. It's hitting the ground over and over and over again, hundreds of thousands of times, and leading to an overuse injury. If you were to spread out that with some cross training, if you were to spread out something with strength training, you are starting to enhance other components of the musculoskeletal system, where the research is tending towards, especially when it comes to performance. There is a ton of evidence that strength training, particularly like the heavier sort of stuff, improves your endurance performance. It will improve your marathon time. That's something that it's hard to get around people's heads. But what's happening is that you're challenging your musculoskeletal system differently. You're just engaging those muscles, engaging those nerves, coordinating the muscles in a different way that it's not used to. And it will adapt and become more resilient to a different component of strength. And I often refer to a runner as having certain strength buckets. You have your endurance bucket, you have your absolute strength bucket, and then you have your power bucket. And all those buckets need to be somewhat full in order to be a resilient runner and have like a ton of like just everything working for you, all these components of power working for you. A lot of runners, like if you're running 4, 5, 6+ times a week, all of your time filling up that endurance bucket, and you're leaving that strength and you're leaving that power completely empty. If you do speed sessions, if you do like say hill sprints, that's tapping into a bit of the power. But the slow, heavy, loaded stuff, tendons, muscles, they just love, and you're just not tapping into that whatsoever. And if you one of the other misconceptions is, once I finally convince someone to start strength training, is they go into the gym and they start doing a whole bunch of body weight exercises because that's what they're good at. They do body weight calf raises, push-ups, pull-ups. They do like body weight lunges, body weight calf raises because they're really good at it, and they ramp up like 30, 40 reps per set. And they also think that that's what they need to do because they need to train their endurance, but their endurance bucket is full. It's completely full, and they're just, that strength bucket is completely empty. And so not only does the evidence support, if you do that slow, heavy resistance training, that will enhance your running performance, you might as well, while you're spending time in the gym, adapting to qualities that are becoming like suited to more of that all-rounder quality and filling up that strength bucket while you're there. There's some really nice, good quality studies where they take different groups of same baseline characteristics and they put them through an endurance strength training as well as running. And then they do like heavy strength training and running. And then they do power and running. And they show that the ones who do strength training and running, they improve their running performance, but more superior to those other training groups. And so it's good to convince people that way that even if just hypothetically, if it doesn't reduce your risk of injury, it'll help your running performance. And so most runners want that. And so that will increase that buy-in, and it's just going to enhance that performance. Like there's, if you were to look at the adaptation response that the body has, it becomes to repetitive kind of stuff. So if you hit the ground with your foot when you run, and it sends shock through the body, it sends stimulus through the tendons, it sends stimulus through the muscle, it sends shock through the bones, and the body recognizes and says, oh, let me adapt to this hitting the ground more often. After about 100, maybe 200, maybe 300 repetitions of you hitting the ground, the body starts to say, you know what, I'm kind of bored of this. I get it. I'm used to it. And in that session, it's just going to become numb to that stimulus. And so while you do that the next day, the body will say, oh yeah, this is something different. But then after 100 steps or so, it'll be like, yep, I'm bored. I'm over this as well. You need to offer your body something different. You need to challenge your body. You need to throw something at it, at something that it's just not used to. And then they're like, oh, this is new. Let me like try and work this thing out as well. And so the well-rounded thing, the resilient the goal of resiliency is offering different stimulus and offering different forces through the body. That's where strength training can really come in handy. And so hopefully there's a couple of tips in there that at least convincing people to start lifting heavy weights. And I probably should say on top of this as well, if we're talking about anything about training errors, I'm not telling you to go put 100 kilos on a squat rack and then try and squat it. We want to adapt to heavy load first. If you haven't done any strength training in your life, you need to start with body weight, but you need to have the goal of eventually adding on weights once you have adapted to the one below that. Slowly start to increase the weights and then slowly start to reap the rewards, but just do so safely.
Well, it was good you said about mixing the stimulus. That's how, a lot of people approach their running training. So why not with the strength training too? You don't just do out long, slow runs every day. You do speed sessions, threshold runs and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely with the weights, heavy weights at least, a different stimulus makes so much sense. But the question is, Eddie, am I going to gain muscle? What do you reckon? Big biceps?
Yeah. This is another apprehension or hesitancy that a lot of runners have, because they look at gym goers and they say, that's not a running body. I don't want that because that's going to hinder my performance because they're big, they're stocky. A heavy runner just doesn't do well. You do want to be light and lean, but there is this effect which Richard Blagrove, who's a UK researcher, he describes this really well. He calls it the interference effect. If you are training, let's say you're doing strength training twice a week, which is what we kind of recommend for gains, but you're also running 4 or 5 times a week, the body will adapt more to whatever's the cardio focused type of event, because it will preference your health, or preference the endurance above all else, above everything else. And so it's almost like with this interference effect, strength train twice a week, but if you're also doing a whole bunch of running, you will still reap most of the rewards of adapting and increasing your strength, but you won't adapt to becoming that massive gym goer type of body. You won't put on a lot of muscle mass. You definitely won't put on a lot of weight. A lot of people kind of keep their weight very consistent, but they lose a little bit of fat, but gain a little bit of muscle, but they maybe put on like a couple of pounds or maybe 1 or 2 kilos here and there with muscle mass, but you're definitely not going to become that big stocky kind of gym goer, because if their goal is to put on muscle mass, they are working so hard to put on muscle mass. It's actually really hard to do.
Really hard.
So they're in the gym. They're training like 5-6 times a week in the gym. They're eating enormous quantities. They're putting in a ton of protein in order to try and put on just little bits of muscle mass. And it's kind of like, it kind of seems like really out of your lane if a runner goes into a gym and says, I shouldn't strength train because I don't want to put on a lot of. Look at you, be like, what the hell are you doing? We worked so hard to put on just that little bit of muscle mass. You're definitely not going to do it. Like a gym goer saying like, that running thing, I don't really want to run because I don't want to run a sub-3 marathon. Yeah. People will be looking at you like, what the hell are you doing? Like, we worked so hard for this sub-3 marathon. You're crazy. Yeah, exactly.
I saw on your Instagram, Brodie, that if people are sort of being inspired by listening to you to get into the gym and do strength training, but don't know where to start, is there maybe 2 or 3 key exercises that you can start with that will really benefit your run? I saw you talk quite a lot about the back squat, which I'm a big fan of. Super simple, super effective.
That's exactly right. Like when it comes to a routine, in a strength routine, it can be extremely complicated, extremely creative. It can offer there's thousands of exercises you can do. But if you wanted to just be simplistic, just reap the rewards of performance, you want to do a couple of things. You want to do lunges, you want to do deadlifts, and you want to do calf raises. And that's pretty much as simple as it can be. If you wanted to get more complicated, then maybe we're introducing some single leg component stuff. So we're looking at single leg deadlifts or single leg squats, single leg calf raises. If you wanted to tailor the calf complex a little bit a little bit more, you can do calf raises with a straight leg, and you can also do calf raises with a bent knee. That actually introduces a bit more of something a bit more. Something a little bit more tailored to what a runner does, because a runner doesn't actually push off with a completely straight leg. So it's using a little bit of the calf complex a little bit differently. So I always encourage people to do either seated calf raises on a seated calf raise machine at the gym, or they can do single leg calf raises holding onto a weight, which is what I do. And you just slightly bend the knee and just keep it slightly bent the entire phase up and the entire phase down. It's a bit of a skill that a lot of people have, because a lot of people want to straighten out the leg as soon as they get into the high up phase. But if you can do that, then you're slightly strengthening the calf complex more tailored to a runner. So that might be something. It could be extremely simplistic at times if you want it to be. And the rep ranges, 3 sets of 8. If you're not used to being in the gym, start with 3 sets of 12 and let it be on the lighter side of things. But once you start implementing really heavy stuff, you look at the rep ranges of probably 3 or 4 sets of around 8 reps. So by the 8th rep, it's very hard to do a 9th, and it's almost impossible to do a 10th. That's how hard and how heavy we're talking to reap those strength benefits.
We talked about pain and injury earlier. Is there, it's hard to explain really, but is there like a sliding scale? So if you got a niggle, most of us probably have got some kind of aches and pains or niggles. Is there a sliding scale? If it's a 7, don't run. If it's a 3, and it doesn't kind of increase as you're running, for example, then that's probably okay to run on. And also a double question: are there any injuries that would require complete rest?
Okay, let's start with the first one. Yes, there are some pain qualities that or pain characteristics that will dictate whether you should be running or not. A lot of times we want snapshots in time to assess. Even if you're injured, if you have like a tendinopathy or a muscle strain or like plantar fasciitis or knee pain, you can actually run. The goal might not even be to run pain-free. You might run with low levels of pain. And a lot of times what we offer is the pain levels should be probably below a 4 out of 10 pain. So in the 1s, 2s, 3s out of 10s. And that means you're definitely not limping. You notice it there, but you're confident to hit the ground as the other side. You're confident to kind of push off that leg or that injured area. And you just pay attention to symptoms along the way. If it stays at that really mild level, then you're okay. If it creeps up to a 4, 5, 6, like quite quickly, you definitely want to pull the pin on that run. You don't want to continue running, because the odds of it continuing into a 7, 8, 9 is quite high. And then you just pay attention to that quality. So that's one snapshot in time, the symptoms during the run. However, we also need to pay attention to symptoms once you cool down, and pay attention to symptoms the next day when you wake up and you start moving around. And if you have those 3 snapshots in time and symptoms are no worse and symptoms are okay and acceptable and within those acceptable boundaries, then it's almost interpreted as, okay, that run was successful, and we've tolerated an acceptable amount of pain. So they're kind of guidelines that you can use. However, we do know for an injury and for these kind of bad kind of niggles, we want movement week by week. So yes, you can have low levels of pain during, low levels the next day, but we do want to see a general trend week by week of it getting better. So less pain during a run, or less pain in the mornings, or it's not lingering around for as long the next morning, those sort of things. And if it's not, then it's best that you either modify your training to something that's more suited, or you get it assessed by a health professional. Those sort of rules are very good to follow. But you also just get niggles. Like if we're talking to trail runners and we're talking to ultra runners, like you're going to get niggles all the time. Like you're going to get like toe pain, foot pain, like just randomly during a trail run. And so there is a little bit of wiggle room to self-interpret how things are going on. It's about like recognizing your body. If you get a blister, that can be like a 7 out of 10 pain, but it can be okay. You can run through that. Yeah. So it is open to a little bit of interpretation. Your next question around the injuries, like is there certain injuries that we don't want to run on? definitely stress fractures. If there is a bony reaction, it's really unfortunate that stress fractures exist, because it is the exception to a lot of the rules that I like to apply. And I kind of want these uniform, like universal principles. But then I always have to mention, okay, but stress fractures are the exception to the rule. They're always the exception to the rule, which is, extremely unfortunate. But if you are developing some sort of bony stress reaction, and if it's progressed to the point where it is a stress fracture, you need to spend some time off it. You need to address it with complete rest until it's pain-free. And then your return to run needs to be symptom-free during, symptom-free after, symptom-free the next day, and then just slowly building up from there. They're usually what we need to do. And so it's kind of, stress fractures aside, it's kind of liberating for a lot of runners, because they think that once they're injured, they have to stop running, when it's in fact quite freeing to let them know that you can still run. You may have to back off the pace. You may have to back off the distance. You may have to back off the terrain and keep to the flats or something like that. You may need to change to like a higher heel drop or something, depending on the injury, but you can still run. Even if it's a lot of walks that are incorporated, just pay attention to symptoms along the way. Make sure there's a steady improvement week by week, and then you're not losing any fitness. Maybe if it's so severe that you have to either stop running, or it's so severe that the running duration is really minimal, find some cross-training alternatives that still maintain your fitness, and you can still like work at quite high intensities that don't flare up that injury. Do your strength training, build up the rehab exercises that you're given, and you still stay quite proactive. You still stay quite fit, and the process is a lot easier physically as well as mentally, because you're still staying engaged. And people hate when they're injured and they have to sit at home and they can't run, and it's just driving them insane because they're losing fitness, and all that progress that they made over the last couple of months to build up their fitness is now like scrapped. Like it's all back at square one. And that can be a real mental battle for a lot of people. And it usually have any cross-training alternatives to keep their fitness and keep them sane. What usually happens is they return to running way too quickly. They just get super frustrated, like, let me just see how it goes. And they run and overdo things, and that flares up their symptoms. And then they're even more frustrated than they were to start with. And it can just be this perpetual downward spiral of like frustration and pain and misery. And it's never a good thing. So the right advice, following the right guidelines can be really good physically and mentally.
Follow your physio's guidelines. I mean,
that's it.
It's not rocket science, is it? But I mean, hands up, I've done it myself, but we all do it. I know. I'll try.
Yes.
Could you?
Yes.
So you've got an injury, but then you find your cross training, so your fitness level is still at a high level. But then obviously, when you start running again, you've got to then. You might be really fit, but your body isn't quite ready for it yet. So you need to, that must be kind of a hard thing to balance, where you are fit, but like you say, your tendons, your ligaments, they're just not ready for that load again.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Hey, cardiovascularly, I'm just as fit, but are my tendons, muscles, ligaments still used to taking the same brunt force, that same ground reaction force, that accumulative load that's required for running? One thing about running that people don't realize is actually, in terms of the load that's required on the body, it accumulates a lot very quickly. And so when you contact the ground, every time you contact the ground, let's take the knee, for example, 2 to 3 times your body weight in force every single step that you take. And so, if someone's puts on a couple of kilos, let's say they put on 5 kilos, and they go for a run back to, when they were, well, let's say a drastic thing. Let's say if we're an ultra runner and we have a 5 kilogram backpack when they're used to running just without a backpack, and all of a sudden they have this backpack and it's 5 kilos heavier, 2 to 3 times your body weight, every single step that you take, that will accumulate very quickly. That is that abrupt change that we don't want. And so when it comes to, okay, you're doing this cross training, you've been on the elliptical, you've been swimming, you've been doing spin classes, you feel really fit, but you've had 4 weeks off running. You need to return at, maybe 50% of your capacity and see how you go. And that's a safe option, but you actually return really quickly. That ramp up back to 100% pre-injury is actually a lot quicker than you might think, but you need to start really conservative and build your way back up. So if you quickly go to 100% of what you're doing pre-injury after having 4 weeks off running, you haven't accumulated those ground reaction forces, those 2 to 3 times your body weight every step. The body's going to say, what are you doing to us? Let's let you know that we're not ready by flaring up your symptoms. And that's just what happens.
Patience, not a runner's virtue. No,
it's not. I always say, like, I've found the right profession because, one, the prevalence of injuries are just so high. Two, there's so many misconceptions out there that lead people astray. But three, the runner themselves are just so impatient. They are like so driven beyond their capacity to kind of make sense in their head what's sensible, and they just do the opposite and just run themselves into the ground. And so it's a good niche to kind of find myself in, because the rate of injuries are so high and creates a lot of frustration, and a lot of people actually need a lot of this help. And so I'm happy to help them. I'm happy to provide them all the information they need, but they need to execute it on as well. It's about training smart. You can have all that knowledge. You can say, all right, these are all the sensible things I should be doing, but you need to execute on them as well.
I think as ultra runners, our whole racing is all about basically breaking down our body and then holding on to pain for as long as possible. That's what an ultra race is. And ignoring all those signals is basically who can ignore the signals of your body telling you to stop the longest wins the race. So it's a very hard balance to get, to then be able to train to listen to those signals and to be brave enough. And it is, I don't know if you find this with athletes in your clinic, it's actually really brave to pull back on your training plan and to admit, and a lot of my athletes who actually admit, actually I am injured and I need to change this. But those are the people that then have the longevity and the consistency in their training.
Longevity and consistency are underappreciated a lot, or not just really recognized, because humans in general are heat of the moment, like short-term thinking, short-term gain type of people. And yeah, you say it is brave to admit that you might need to back off, but a lot of people, unfortunately, they back off because they've had so many mistakes in the past. They're now eventually learning how to implement in the future. Like the ones who come to see a physio at the right time are the ones who have made the wrong mistake 5 times before, and they just learn from their mistakes. That's how it happens. But yeah, it's unfortunate that we're so driven that we just run ourselves into the ground that we're injured, and then we're so stubborn that even when we are injured, sometimes we ignore it and then just continue running. It's so bad. Usually what happens, I talk about motivation levels that motivate someone to go seek help. And it's not when they're in pain. It's definitely not when they're in pain. It's when their pain gets so bad that they can't run. That's when they come in. It's like all of a sudden their symptoms are just not bad enough. As it gets worse, that they're like, oh, I can put up with it. But then when they wake up and they can't weight bear on that side, and they can't get that run done today, and their race is in 2 months' time or 2 weeks' time, and they physically cannot run, they're booking in that day. That's how drastic that motivation level swings to, I need to get this sorted out. And then they come to the physio and they say, I've got this race in 2 weeks. You need to get me better. And then you look at their history and how bad they've made their injury, and they expect to be back running in a couple of days. It really doesn't work that way. And so when that happens enough times to a runner, they eventually and get it sorted out better, or change their training for the better, or just like work on prevention a little bit better. And so that's usually how that internal drive goes. And it's a way of life. Like if I was to focus on like getting my car fixed to the mechanic, like they will always say, get a routine service. And sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I ignore it. Sometimes I say it's not a big issue. But as soon as my car breaks down, I'm booking in the next day or that day, because the level of urgency and the motivation levels go through the roof. And so I recognize it is human nature. I recognize it just happens in all facets of life, but we do learn. Like if my car constantly breaks down, I'm getting it regularly serviced just because I've learned from that mistake. That's all that's true. We might get new running shoes and think that's all better, but that's just how like human behavior works. It's just human nature, which I accept, but there are some things that we can do to be a bit smarter and a bit kinder to ourselves.
Has there been any, I'm just really curious, has there been any running trends that has been like problematic from an injury point of view? It might not be the actual trend itself, but more the transition the athlete takes into the trend. I think the kind of minimalist footwear movement, I think we saw quite a high level of injuries. Maybe that's not the problem itself. Like I say, it might be just one day they were running in a maximal shoe, the next day they were running in a pretty much barefoot. Is that something you're saying?
I can share with you a nice study where they took 14 runners, and they were all used to running in traditional shoes, and they said, okay, here are these 5-finger barefoot shoes, so like no support whatsoever, and we want you all to run in them, but here is the pamphlet to show you how to transition correctly. Okay. And they gave them this pamphlet, showed them all how to slowly progress in order for the body to adapt. And after 8 to 12 weeks, 12 out of those 14 runners end up with an injury. And so that is an enormous occurrence of injuries. And when they asked runners afterwards, but did you read the pamphlet? Not one of those runners followed the advice to the T. They didn't adhere to all of those instructions within the pamphlet. And so that, in my mind, like perfectly illustrates the mindset of a runner. And yes, transitioning to minimalist shoes is totally fine. I run in minimalist shoes 80-90% of my overall running. I absolutely love them, but I have spent time adapting to that shoe so that my feet, my calves, my Achilles are strong enough to run in that shoe. And if you were to have this wide swing towards 100% minimalist, so absolutely 100% barefoot, even I would need to take a lot of time to adapt to those type of shoes. And it's a dangerous game, but you can do so. It is possible to do so, but you just need to be really sensible, and that's what runners aren't. And so when it comes to what type of shoe and when it comes to those type of trends, yes, we do know through science that a lighter shoe helps increase running performance. We do know that a lighter shoe improves running economy. So if you do want the lighter shoe, then you can go for it, but you need to transition to it if it's a different quality than what you're used to. And we are seeing exceptions to the rule when it comes to shoe technologies and foams, really light foams. But usually the trade-off for a lighter shoe is a less supportive shoe. Yeah. And so we want to make sure that transition is very gradual and allowing your body time to adapt to that stimulus. So that's one trend, definitely. The other trend, which still exists, it's been around for as long as I can remember and still exists, is the belief that runners need to transition away from a heel strike and to a midfoot strike. Yeah. You need to heel striking is the devil, is what a lot of people think, because the ground reaction forces are never good. They think that the braking forces that it applies is just detrimental, and you're better off transitioning to a midfoot strike where it's more economical, it's more safe for you, it absorbs the load to a lesser degree and reduces your risk of injury theoretically. But the evidence show that's not the case. When it comes to running technique, yes, if you are overstriding, that's something that you need to change. If your cadence is really low, which usually goes hand in hand with an overstride pattern, yes, you need to definitely change that, because that is an unwanted braking force that we're not wanting. So when you very first make contact with the ground, if it's too far in front of your body, it will produce that braking force, and we want to move forward as efficiently as we can. So we might as well reduce the amount of braking forces. And so that's where the theory came about of contacting more under your body with a midfoot to help reduce a lot of that. But you can just as well contact with your heel closer to underneath your body, and you have that same effect. You have that same improvement in economy. You have that same change, that same reduction in braking forces. Yeah. However, you're still adapted to that style of running. And what a lot of runners don't really get is, if you try to transition, if you've been a heel striker your whole entire life, and then you try and transition to a mid-strike foot strike, it's going to change the loads on the body, and it's going to have an incredible swing in the demands of the foot, demands of the calf, demands of the Achilles, I've had a lot of people try and transition. They just end up with calf strains. They end up with Achilles tendinopathy, plantar fasciitis, foot stress fractures, all those sort of things. And yes, you can do it. You definitely can do it. It does take a lot of time for you to transition, but the benefits of you finally getting there just don't add up. The benefits just don't weigh up the risk of patiently trying to transition to the forefoot strike. And that's me saying, like, I, from the get-go, have been I forefoot strike. I never heel strike. Yeah. I grew up playing basketball where I was constantly running on my toes, and that's just the adapted into endurance recreational running. And so you might think that I would be an advocate for midfoot striking, but I like to follow the science rather than me preaching my own practices. And if you mid-strike, if you contact with the midfoot, that's great. If you contact with the heel, congratulations, you're a part of 90% of the runners that are out there. You don't need to reduce your risk. You don't need to transition. If you do have an overstride, that does need to be corrected, but you're just as fine contacting with the heel. So that's another trend.
Don't mess with nature. Brodie, we could ask you so many questions. We haven't got through half the ones we're going to have, but if people are listening to this, maybe when they're out running and they want to have a look on you, look you up on social media, where's the best place to listen, to find you? Give a shout out to your platforms.
Yeah, sure. So I am quite active on Instagram. So at Run Smarter Series is my handle. I post exercises, blogs, research articles, like just anything that's running related. If you want to build on your running IQ, you can search the Run Smarter podcast, listen to the first 10 episodes. They cover 10 universal principles to overcome and prevent injury. And then you can just scroll through the feed after that and find topics that you're interested in. Yeah, they would be the two main things if someone were to try and learn more and build on their running IQ.
You mentioned you did an online running clinic. So do you can you treat international patients as well?
Yeah, about a third of my caseload at the moment is people from the UK. So usually, like we said at the start, I highly advocate people educating themselves first. So I just take people to the podcast. There are ads in there of me saying that if you do require one-on-one tailored assistance, if you want to work together, this is my website. But they can go to runsmarter.online if they do want to work or if they're curious about online physio. But yes, I treat runners all over the world. Invest in your own running knowledge first. If you can't overcome your injury, if you're still struggling, if you still want that tailored, we can have a chat.
Great. Gosh, how refreshing to hear that from a physio.
Yeah.
Right, Gary, your favorite part of the interview.
Oh, yes.
Gary wrote these questions, I'd just like to say, because I don't even understand
Nothing
them.
to do with any of these. Hopefully I don't
take them away.
Okie doke, right. Do you love or hate Vegemite?
I have Vegemite about 6 times a week on my saladas. Butter and Vegemite, absolutely love it.
Very good. You're in the pub. You got 2 choices: VB or 4X.
I wouldn't really choose either of them. If I were to choose one, it'd be VB because that's Victorian bitter. It's in our state of Victoria, and we don't get a lot of 4X here. It's usually up north in Queensland. But yeah, as much as it does give me a big hangover the next day, I'll choose VB.
VB, yeah, it's pretty strong.
Definitely.
Beach or bush?
Bush. I think trail running near like creeks and rivers, that would be the best. Me with my Irish skin that doesn't like salt water or like sand and gets burnt very easily, I tend not to favor the beach. I'd like the shade of the bush, but do love beach cricket as well. So there's a plus on the beach side of things as well.
Yeah. Okay, right. Not too sure how this one's going to go, but you're in your local fish and chip shop. You just put in your barramundi and chips order. You're going to have a grilled or fried?
I usually go grilled. I don't like a lot of batter these days. I try and keep quite lean. So yeah, fried still tastes pretty good. But
when I was in Australia, my mind was blown that I had the choice in a regular fish and chip shop to have it fried or grilled. It was like, my goodness, this is fantastic. All right, the next question is: you're you're at the local car park late at night. There's two gangs, rival gangs. One's got a load of Fords, one's got the Holdens. Where do you affiliate with?
Oh God. I have had one. I've drove one Ford in my life, and so that's going to be. I think I'll have to go with that based on my previous experience. I do like Holdens, but yeah, I have to stick to my guns and have my loyal Ford based on past experiences.
Do you like my Australian intel, Eddie?
I have no idea where these have come from, Gary. I never knew you were such a connoisseur of all things Australian.
Right, this is my
Renaissance man. I'm very impressed.
When I was in Australia, I have a memory of massive fiberglass sculptures that would celebrate something kind of famous about that small town.
Yeah,
crabs, crocodiles,
pineapples.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite sculpture? You've got an overseas guest coming, and you're going to take them to see a sculpture. Which one would it be?
See, this is where I fall apart because I actually haven't seen a lot of Australia, not a lot of mainland Australia anyway. I mainly stick to the coast. Enormous emu that's like close to one of our parklands in like, so I'd definitely take you go see this enormous emu that's like maybe about 30 meters high. So yeah, I guess I'll stick with that.
Fantastic. That's it. I've done that. I thought I did well, Eddie.
What about my one? I gave one question for this.
Sorry, sorry.
I've got one with my extensive Australian knowledge: home and away or neighbours?
Or neighbours.
I am neither, unfortunately. Maybe I'll stick with.
It was going so well already.
Yeah, I might stick to. I know my girlfriend's big on home and away and doesn't watch Neighbours, and so maybe I'll lock in that answer.
I was always a home and away girl with the beach.
Lovely.
A little bit more lifeguards.
It's the Coronation Street, isn't it? It's the Coronation Street equivalent, I think. Cool. That's it. That's it for me. Thanks, Brodie. I really enjoyed that. Bit of fun and
I had a lot of fun.
Awesome, yeah.
What a brilliant. So much little nuggets of absolute brilliant education, and people go and check out, especially the Instagram page. If you're scrolling through, just spend 5 minutes a day just having a little look at everything. There's some great little quick bits of information that might just save you many bucks on going to the physio and missing races and keep you consistently running. So thank you so much, Brodie.
We didn't talk about them,
guys.
But they can check out Injury Prone Pete as well if they head over to you.
Good work. Yes, absolutely.
There you go. There's a little nugget for you, listeners. Go and find Injury Prone Pete. Well, thanks very much, Brodie. Take care.
Thank you.
Well, that was awesome. I love enthusiastic people with knowledge that want to share knowledge. And luckily for us, he's already agreed to come back on the show. So we just need to schedule something. And I can't wait for that. Upcoming races, Eddie, what we got?
Punk Panthers Nidderdale Way Challenge. Races, a race for everybody, as long as you like racing over 26 miles, 28 miles all the way up to 108. Oh, and then you found something.
Well, this is not, there's no hills involved here, definitely. And I'm pretty sure you just go lots of out and backs along South NP for this one. South NP, a marathon. And yeah, I hope Mother Nature's kind to the people out on the pit. Everybody this weekend, actually. But have you ever been to South NP yet?
No.
Well, it's really long, 1.34 miles.
1.34 miles. So you run along it and turn around. Do you reckon there's a cup of squash and a rich tea biscuit at one end?
Yeah, I think, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's where Jamie Oliver has one of his...
Oh, where he does that show?
Yeah, I think that's it. They got a train. You could jump on a train along to the end. It is, it's funny.
It's that long, of course. Now, there could be a massive headwind and then a massive tailwind.
Well, usually, you get a wind going from west to east, so it'd be nice for 1.34 miles and then horrible for 1.34.
Yeah, you could be like 6-minute miling and then come back at like 12.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. And I don't know how, but I've actually been to Southend quite a few times. And
it's a long way from home for you, Gary.
I flirted with the South.
On your holidays?
No, I did. I lived down south for, crikey, I must be nearly 15, 16 years. And I ended up in Southend. I have no idea why, but yeah, Southend PA, it's great actually. So yeah, best of luck to everybody there. And my goodness me, fingers crossed, the weather is kind for everybody. Even the marshals, that's the worst.
Oh,
my
can
God.
you imagine if you're on the out checkpoint?
Oh, no way. But yeah, fish and chips at the end. Oh, that'd be lovely. Oh, imagine, because you just smell fish and chips all day.
Or the way you might have had enough of it by the end, you might be like, oh no, get me to Burger King.
Yeah, for the Rebel Whopper people, that's a good non-meat alternative Burger King do. No.
Oh, do
no
they do
sponsors.
meat? They do veggie options now, these big.
This is great content, but I have to say it is pretty good. No, I'm not lying. We've had quite a few Rebel Whoppers over the years.
Rebel Whopper.
Rebel Whopper.
What's in it?
Oh, I don't know. Some just it's their Whopper basically, but with a non-meat patty. Is that what they call them?
Does it look and taste like meat?
I have to say, when I eat it, I've probably had half a dozen of them, and
What today?
no. Not today. And I don't, sometimes when you have a non-meat alternative, you sometimes feel a bit non-satisfied with your meal, especially when the alternative was a burger or something like that. I have to say, yeah, I'd give the Rebel Whopper a strong 9 out of 10.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Send one over.
Live reaction from Eddie.
That's how exciting my days got. Right, what you got coming up?
I have got more of the same, really. I think we've got a threshold run tonight. And then I've got, I think, 5. In my plan, it says I should do a race, a half marathon this weekend, which I'm not going to do because I've not entered anything. So it's a slightly less intense as far as the workouts are concerned. Hopefully with my non-YouTubing, I'll do all of my strength and conditioning. I might go to the moors and do some kind of traily miles and not drive over the lakes. And I don't think I've got anything else planned. That's about me. But what about yourself?
Just grinding out. I feel a little bit like Groundhog Day. And that's why my content, listeners, this week is so dull, because let's be honest, the life of an ultra runner is really dull a lot of the time. And my energy is, I kind of think, because I think normally this time of year I've kind of done my races, but it feels like a really long time. And I've got nobody to train with, I've got no friends, and I'm just by myself. And I get up in the morning and it's cold. And it's taking me more and more to get out the door, to be like, to get, oh, come on.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. We'll both end up doing a race towards the end of the year. And how's that sitting with you? Because normally an autumn marathon or whatever it is, I'd be like, that's it now until, say, January.
I don't think I'll do it again, to be honest. I really love this time of year in the mountains because it's so beautiful and it's so quiet. But it kind of feels a kind of hard time of the year, because I don't know whether it's to do with the quietness or the change of the scenery season for me to be like, come on, dig. I'm having to dig deep into my reservoir of where it feels like I should be like hunkering down for winter and putting on a few pounds and staying in. And instead I'm like, oh, I gotta get out. So I'm being kind to myself and trying to like we talked about the priority list at the beginning of the podcast, like, okay, you get the training done and then trying to schedule my day so I have got a little bit of downtime, because I find I just have half an hour just to breathe and just the refueling and stuff, because as we all know, when we're really busy with busy jobs, busy family life, and then you add in the stress of like I'm now in the sort of midst of probably some of the biggest running sessions I've done in a long time. And I haven't even got to my biggest week yet.
10 times 1K, you're looking at 40 minutes roughly.
40 minutes of pretty solid effort on top of, and it's not that session actually isn't really that hard. I wasn't going as fast as I could, but it's the accumulation, isn't it? But that's what makes us stronger. And like I always say, that's the back end of a 100 miler, that's the back end of a 50 miler, is that grit that's what you're training for. The first bit is the easy stuff, is the second bit. So eyes on the prize, stay focused, stop feeling sorry for myself, because again, when I was running and I was feeling a bit sorry for myself, I was like, I'm literally in the middle of nowhere, there's nobody here, I just finding this really hard to keep pushing. And then I was like, yes, but just be grateful that you're experiencing this feeling. You're experiencing this feeling of feeling really tired and feeling really like, I can't do this, but then going out and doing it. And that's huge. The easy option would be to stay at home and clean the bathrooms, go and do the supermarket shop. You know, everybody feels their feelings. You're feeling that stuff, even if it's not the feelings that are particularly nice to feel. You're alive. And for God's sake, you're in the Alps.
You've always got to try your best, I think, no matter what your motivation is. But to try and not just exist, live, do the things that
exactly. I am truly living all depths of emotions right now. From that 6 a.m. wake up when I go, I can't even get out of bed. I cannot do that. To doing a session and then coming away and feeling great. To then hobbling around the rest of the day. Brodie would be proud though, because the hobbling is just hobbling all the time. I had a 2-hour French history lesson yesterday on a plastic chair. And then when she was like, okay, off you go, I was like, I don't think my hamstrings are going to be able to get up from this chair. And people go, oh, you're right. And you're like, oh, it was pretty good for me, actually, just to hold the handrail going down the stairs.
I always find it amazing. Like, literally, I can barely get out of the car some days, but then you can go and run for 5-6 hours. It's like, how does that even work?
Brodie would tell us all the science. That should be a question for Brodie next time. He'd tell us all the science.
Didn't he say that literally, unless it's a stress fracture, pretty much kind of keep moving? That was his.
Yeah, I think the runners would take that, and he did say that too, didn't he? We'd take that. I was like, oh, okay, so would 10 by 1K is fine then, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, I'll stop moaning. I love it, really. I just always feel it's important to explain my depth of emotion. And Gary, you're the only person I've talked to for a few days, so you get the brunt of it.
That's right. Yeah, the only adult you've talked to. I'm the best.
Right, let's do your competition. Gary's so proud with how well this is going.
I thought people would like the medals. It's a nice one, isn't it? The medals. And there's loads of different emotions, what that makes that picture special for people. And you know what? It's quite emotional when you read what some people, what the medal means to them. So yeah, really enjoying this competition.
We're running it till the 26th of October, aren't we? So
26th of October, yeah.
So do head over, just have a look if you don't fancy posting a picture, some inspiration over there. And if you haven't posted a picture yet, do post a picture. Few days left to do that. And Tim over at Cheer Charge sent me a message today saying they have got some new mini vegan and gluten-free flapjacks now available. Yeah. So I think check it. I know loads of people have been asking for those. Haven't tested them yet. We'll be looking forward to a taste test package soon, hopefully. But we shall definitely offer those to our prize winners if that is their taste sensation choice.
Try and find the post, though. You know, it's wicked, anybody posting pictures in the group, but if they could pop them in the Facebook post for the competition, it's a lot easier for Eddie and I to find the entrance. They might get lost in the Facebook thread. If you like this show, please like, share, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for listening, everybody. I always have a blast, Eddie, our little Tuesday Zoom call.
Sorry for the low, Eddie, this week. She'll be back. She won't. She'll be even worse next week. Perhaps tune out for a few weeks, listeners.
It's a worry when Eddie's energy is low because you are the energy of the show. But anyway, that was episode 60. Thanks for listening, everybody. And again, I've not checked. I've not checked for any 5-star reviews, but we'll go over to iTunes and take a look. Thanks to our show sponsor, Cheer Charge. My name's Gary Thwaites.
I'm Eddie Sutton.
And let's run to the hills.